Okay, good morning. Hello, thanks for coming. I'm David, Partnerships Manager at BIMA. I can see there's a good mix of members and non-members in the room, so that's great. I'm just going to run through quickly a little bit about BIMA and how you can get involved, and then I'll pass over to our experts for today. Clicker obviously doesn't work. No worries. Cheers, David. So BIMA are the representative body for the digital industry. We do that through four main ways, so learning, networking, awarding and mentoring. Our mentorship scheme is really interesting actually. It's been running for about a year and we're taking on new cohorts every quarter, so it's going from strength to strength, and if you're interested in getting involved then give us a shout afterwards because it's really, really good. So this is who we are. So we're obviously a membership organisation. We've now got about 400 corporate partners. So digital and full service agencies, as you'd expect, is kind of our heritage. But actually these days we're seeing more and more brands get involved, so the likes of Nando's, BBC, Sony Music, Spotify and all sorts of others. Charities, technology companies, big and small. Academia, so universities that are looking to reach out to industry and your companies, and startups. So a really good kind of melting pot of different ideas and people, that just makes it really interesting. And this is our kind of community and council structure that really makes BIMA quite unique. So we've got a central council that meets up every quarter to really look at the kind of big picture stuff that BIMA are doing, the direction that we're taking. But then each of those people also run their own councils around a topic of importance. So we've got think tanks around artificial intelligence, immersive tech and blockchain who are running the event today. And all of these other councils that are just kind of really important for the future of our industry. We're actually doing a call for new councils next week, so anyone in the community can put forward an idea for a new council, or if you want to be on some of these councils, we'll be letting you know which ones have spaces. So I know straight away that AI, data, diversity, inclusion are all looking for new people, and so are loads of the others. So yeah, do give us a shout if you're interested. And finally, Digital Day. So this is the next big thing that BIMA are doing. We've been running it for 6 years now. It's our education initiative where we pair up schools with companies all across the country. So you can go in and teach students about digital industry, digital careers, and you get them excited for the future. It's really, really important. 12th of November, we're taking sign-ups now and we'll match you with a local school. And it just takes a couple of people to take the day out and kind of go back to the school for the day. So yeah, that's it from me. We'll get started. So today, as I say, is a breakfast briefing from our blockchain council, all about cryptocurrency and specifically Facebook's Libra. That's as much as my knowledge is on the topic. So I'll pass you over to our experts. So I think David Lockie will kick us off.
Thanks, Dave. Does my voice really sound like that? That's what
So, our second man called David this morning. How you doing, you alright?
Apparently so, yeah.
Hello everybody. You've got the enviable job of staring at our faces behind us, and we're sitting in the wrong order, so why don't we do some intros just to make it really clear. Hey, I'm Rob Belgrave. I co-chair the Blockchain Council. I helped him set it up a couple of years ago, and there was one person that I thought would be a great co-chair with David, and we've done our best to bring together interesting people from the UK community in what is still a very early emerging field of technology, and try and just give the industry a bit of insight and have some discourse about what's going on. I think Libra is a great talking point, which we'll come to today. When I'm not doing BIMA stuff, I run a business called Wirehive, which is a cloud services business, AWS and Microsoft partner, helping businesses kind kind of do cool stuff with cloud services. And my side hustle is a business called Offset Earth, which is a subscription service where you can all offset your carbon footprints for £5 a month. We don't make any money out of that. So that's me, guys.
Hi everyone, so I'm Bryony Widdup. I'm a partner at law firm DLA Piper. I work in the fintech practice, so I work every day with token projects and blockchain projects and various different types of crypto industry magic. And I particularly specialise in stablecoin, so another side hustle like that of mine is Global Digital Finance, which is an industry body which has come together in that crypto space to create kind of governance and codes of conduct and best practice in the space. It grew up out of the issues around sort of lack of regulation and the kind of inability of responsible actors to be able to make new businesses in the space because it really wasn't clear what to do from a regulatory perspective in order to move forward. So that body came together, Global Digital Finance. It's not just UK, it's all over the world. And I co-chaired this last year the stablecoin working group, which put together and just issued the stablecoin code of conduct for issuers. So obviously in doing that we brought together 50 relevant businesses from across the stablecoin industry to create that code. So I've had huge exposure to the stablecoin space, and I think the stablecoin is where it's at really for the future or the immediate future of crypto and the bridge between the real world and crypto space.
And just before David does a fantastic intro, no doubt, hands up if you know what stablecoin is. Yeah, I have a feeling that might be the case.
We can explain.
All right, we'll come to that. Because we're all thinking, you used to be really interesting, but what is a stablecoin? Yeah.
Morning everyone. So David Lockie, I'm co-chair with Rob of this BIMA Blockchain Council. I run a business called Pragmatic. We do interesting and difficult things with WordPress day to day.
Which is possible, believe it or not. You should see some of the amazing stuff they do. No, someone smirked. I thought that was a bit harsh.
Haters going to hate. What are you going to say? There is a tremendous amount to Libra. So I'm due to give a lecture at the University of Sussex, a guest lecture as part of their blockchain module. And as I was going out and learning about this stuff, I mean, I've kind of been following it since day one, but I've been putting together the slides, obviously far too late, but they'll get there. I realised just how many ways it's interesting and potentially impactful for lots of different industries, and so I thought this would be a good event because it kind of, there's so much happening with blockchain and crypto that sometimes it's useful just to like pick one thread and pull it and see what shakes out. And yeah, hugely grateful to Bryony, especially for joining us on literally 3 days' notice. Thank you. So am I going to, I'll kick off with it.
Well, should we define stablecoins first, just in case? I feel like it might come up again.
Why don't we?
Shall we go at that? No? Okay. David's got a thread in his mind.
Okay, vision. So this is quite a casual session this morning, very open to audience participation, whether that's like a question, a contradiction, a clarification, an addition, whatever it is, just shout out. The more interaction, the better. I guess we want to cover a few different things. So we want to cover like what is Libra, so that we're all on the same page. We want to talk about its impact economically. We want to talk about its impact on the digital space. And we want to talk about anything else that you want to talk about as well. So yeah, I guess I wouldn't mind doing a quick intro and then we'll dive into that stuff. And I have to look at my phone because there's more than 3 things I need to remember, which doesn't work anymore. So what is Libra? It's a vision. It's a vision for a global universal currency. It's an open source software project. It's on GitHub. It's had thousands of contributions. It's there. It's code. it's a new financial infrastructure and currency, so it's a single data structure that records the state and history of all the transactions that have ever happened. It's a cryptocurrency, it's a consensus protocol, it's a Swiss non-profit organisation, it's a consortium of powerful tech companies, it's one of the most elegant pieces of corporate strategy I've seen. It's, I think, an economic fair play at a global level. And it's all of those things which makes it really interesting from lots of different perspectives. So now, stablecoins.
Okay, so cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, right? Everybody kind of relate those two terms. The one thing that you probably know about Bitcoin, even if you know nothing else, is that its price is extremely volatile. So it's had, some major highs and then some major lows. The idea of using Bitcoin as a way to exchange value between people is one of its reasons for existence. But it can't really function properly as money in the way that our fiat currency, so pounds and dollars and things, does, when it can't hold value over a period of time, or you can't have confidence in the fact that it will hold value for a period of time. So the idea of stablecoin projects is to create a digital currency, so like Bitcoin in that sense, so a cryptocurrency, a digital coin, which can transact value between people across a digital network, but that won't have those fluctuations in value that we see with Bitcoin, for example, but a lot of other coins in the space. The way in which that stabilization is effective, so it's about stablecoin stabilization of value, nothing to do with horses, like my partner thought, is that you attach some underlying assets structurally to the token. You attach underlying assets which are in themselves more stable in value. So the obvious one is Tether is the most kind of obvious example. It attaches USD Tether attaches US dollars in an account to the actual digital token that's issued, with the idea that one token, the value of one token will be pegged, maybe 1-to-1 with that underlying $1. So that's the most simple structure. But there are other structures as well. So you can use gold, for example. So there are quite a few gold-backed projects that have come onto the market recently. You could use other types of assets, potentially like real estate or other types of commodities. Also, another idea is to use crypto. So, that sounds crazy, right? Because crypto, we just talked about, that's really volatile. But the idea with that is that if you over-collateralize, so if you put more crypto in the underlying pool, then you peg the value of your token to be worth, less than what you have in your pool, then that value ought to be able to remain stable because the pool is always bigger than the value of the representative value of that token. So hopefully that's kind of a basic idea of what stablecoin is. It's a stabilized cryptocurrency. So does anyone?
Everyone put their hand up.
Immediate questions.
Yeah, really do just shout out, put your hand up at any point today. Go for it.
Can I ask a very naive question? If it is tethered to the US dollar, what is the advantage of it over the US dollar?
Yes, first of all, they're not always tied to, but a lot of the basic structures are pegged 1-to-1. And the advantage is that with a dollar, in order to then transact in the digital space or in the crypto space, you've got like an in and an out. So you've got to convert your dollar into something that you can put in a digital wallet, and then do your transaction. And then at the other end, you would have to convert back out again into fiat if that's what you were doing. And all of those steps create fees, create time inefficiency, and it's not like a liquid way of doing those kind of transactions. So stablecoins originally, basically arose because people who were doing a lot of trading in the crypto space didn't want to have to keep backing out into fiat to hedge to protect the value when values were getting too volatile. So stablecoin is like a hedge for traders. It's a place to go where you can secure your value if the markets have got too volatile and you want to move out without having to back out into fiat. But then beyond that, coming at it from a more, like that's obviously like a kind of quite a financial services, like tradery perspective. Looking at it from a more retail perspective, what you see is that if you imagine that instead of having backed by $1 US, so it's just effectively like a digitized dollar, and this is where this is going to create a good bridge into Libra, I think. You imagine you've got a pool of assets instead that's like a different thing. So it's different types of currencies, and maybe it's some government bonds and things like that are all like stable in value, but it's multiple different things. That then creates a unitization of that value that's not necessarily one currency, but that people can relate to as being relative to how we see value in the world today. And if you do that, then you can create international payment systems that are not dependent on converting, my dollars into your euros, into your whatever pesos, etc., etc. So then you begin to, from a retail perspective, begin to create something that's actually usable on a global basis to move value around the world, beyond national borders, and beyond our sort of existing definition of value, how we see it like £1, €1, $1, whatever. Does it make sense? So the use cases are growing, and that use case in particular, which we'll come to talk about, is incredibly powerful and pragmatic.
Yeah, I'd build on that. I'd say the vision of Bitcoin was the money for the internet. We've got this globalist economy powered by technology. We can communicate immediately with people all over the world. Why can't we send them money in the same way? There's some people in the room who I won't call out from a payment network here today. Any regulators in the room, shout out to you as well. There's loads of people from the kind of banking cartel with a real vested interest in what's going on here, because for a long time, all of those different organisations have been the only way we can all transfer value between each other. And that's slow in many cases. We take for granted what we have in the UK with banks and faster payments and all this other good stuff. It's not like that everywhere. Even in some quite developed countries, it's not like that. FX still, you're lucky if you pay interbank rate on FX, thanks to Monzo and all the fintech kind of revolution that's going on. People in this room, I'm sure many of you have that orange card in your wallet, you take a holiday with you. Well, 5-10 years ago, we weren't even doing that, right? So there's still a lot of friction in payments generally, particularly in the context of internet payments between people in different currencies. And I think that's the other side of why stablecoins are really interesting, particularly a sort of universal stablecoin like Libra that's trying to be kind of independent of exchange rate by being its own currency pegged against a basket of different things. There's a load of really interesting innovation that these things open up, which I think we're all just starting to get a feel for now. And frankly, even Facebook don't have all the answers to this yet, as is pretty clear. Is anyone from Facebook here? I feel like we should probably just establish that now. You do have to tell us, by the way, that's the law. Or from Libra, because it's technically not Facebook. No? Okay, good. That means you can be extra disparaging when we need to be. Fantastic answer. I agree with everything you've said. And I think it's stablecoins often people bump into Tether. Tether's actually the name of the product, but it's tethered. People think, that's just the term for what it is. Tether was just set up by 3 guys who ran a crypto exchange to try and solve a trading problem. But then, as is sometimes the way with emerging tech, it's balloons into this amazing way. What if we could send gold across the world without having to move it between vaults by tokenizing it and then selling the tokens, and they're redeemable because gold's kind of fungible, right? An ounce of gold is the same as another ounce of gold, and so there's all this stuff people are figuring out, and I think Libra is one example of that, right? So maybe that gives us the segue. David, what got you really excited about Libra? Yeah, to give you a chance to say something again.
I'm going to go like totally left field now and say it's also like stablecoins and cryptocurrencies generally are a balance against decentralization. So we're lucky to live in an open, free democracy, but that's not the case all over the world. And so if you're an unlucky person that lives in a place where there is lots of control of money, you can buy this, you can't buy that, or you're under heavy sanctions like Iran or North Korea, you can't move US dollars around, but you can move stablecoins because there's no centralized authority that controls the transfer. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but I do think it's good to have a balance against this sort of increasing centralization of power. I definitely don't feel like democracy is what it once was, and so having technology is a bit of a balance, so that if things get too autocratic, then like we have ways to transact. That's another way of thinking about it. Another way too is that the internet is decentralized, right? Anyone can get an IP, stand up a web page, participate in the web. Wherever you're from, you can participate. And financial networks aren't like that. They're controlled through know your customer, anti-money laundering regulations, and so it's a permission system. And that means that everything that happens currently online, with the exception of decentralized cryptos, goes through those centralized payment rails or providers, MasterCard, Visa, whatever it is. And that's not the way the web is. So we're kind of bolting on these centralized systems onto a decentralized network, and for the large part that works really well. So you go and buy a pair of shoes, you want to put your credit card information, you don't want to like accidentally buy a pair of shoes, right? But for a whole different class of transactions, actually having something that's much more web native is really fascinating. So the idea of micropayments, microtransactions is something that those of you who've got kids are probably like, it's second nature to them. They play games online, they earn whatever it is, like Linden dollars or ISK or
V-Bucks for the Fortnite people.
Yeah, or World of Warcraft dollars, which are worth more than the Venezuelan national currency now, apparently. But like for them, it's business as usual to earn, spend, trade, and even cash out money from online worlds. And something that's interesting about Libra is, has anyone seen that trailer for Facebook Horizon? Okay, so it's their virtual world. It's like Second Life. So it's like an entire virtual world for people. When there's eventually a bit of hardware that people can wear day to day, they'll go into that virtual world. They'll do what they do in other virtual worlds, games, Second Life, etc. And they want to buy, trade, sell.
All the things.
All the things
Yeah. People do in virtual worlds. Yeah.
And if it is this mixed reality blended universe, then why would spending that money be different from spending this money here buying a cup of tea? So it's interesting how their vision for this mixed reality universe also depends on having like a functioning currency.
I realised that we've defined stablecoins, we haven't defined Libra. So at the end of last year, so at the end of 2018, Mark Zuckerberg, in his sort of Christmas message that he sends every year about what he's working on for the year ahead, I know, right, it's just funny now. I don't think he's ever going to come back from this, thank God. But so last year, back when everybody was still kind of a Zuckerberg fan, I guess, he gave this message, which was he always gives one piece of technology he's going to invest in the year ahead, right? And for 2019, his technology was cryptocurrency. He was going to investigate the impact of decentralized networks and cryptocurrency on Facebook. And so that was the kind of first formal notice anybody had that they might do something like this. Fast forward a bit, I think it was May, they started hiring people. People kind of figured it out because like roles get posted on job boards in Silicon Valley and stuff, and they started hiring blockchain people. They took a couple of Coinbase engineers, I think. There was a rumour that Charlie Lee, the Litecoin founder, was consulting for them. Anyway, those of us in the sector kind of got wind that something was going on. A bit like everybody knows Apple are building glasses, even though they've never formally admitted it. And then come to June, I think it was, they hired David Marcus, who was previously the boss of the Messenger division at Facebook, so kind of exec with pedigree and had been there a long time, quite trusted. And within 2 months, I think it was, they announced Libra. So it seemed like it moved pretty quickly, right? They went from, what are we going to do? How are we going to do it? Okay, we've figured out the sort of talent we might need, and then in that kind of unicorn farm way that Silicon Valley likes to do it, they went, this is the problem we're going to solve, this is how we're going to do it, and it seems to have happened quite quickly. And I've got friends at Facebook, reasonably senior, who sort of will, not on the record, but will acknowledge that that is what their perspective was as well. It seemed like it moved really, really quickly. So then fast forward, Facebook announced this thing called Libra, which is this kind of, as David said at the start, was kind of trying to be a currency for the world, backed by a basket of different things. As Bryony mentioned, it's sort of trying to create this super stable asset, and everybody freaked the fuck out, right? Like the regulatory apparatus of the world just lost it with this. And I think with reasonable grounds, given how sort of casually they just went, well, we're just going to start a currency, right? I mean, that's okay, we can do that. And I think it was the kind of hypocrisy of them saying, oh, just trust us, it'll be fine, given what had just happened. And so they got hauled up in front of Congress. Some of you probably saw the Senate hearings, and it became clear quite quickly that this wasn't going to be plain sailing, that they weren't going to get this thing out the door without a lot of resistance. And the initial charter, I've got the names of all the people on it. So they signed up an incredible list of businesses to be founding partners. And I wonder how many of them felt they kind of had to do this actually, because better the devil you know. So originally it was, the names you would know include eBay, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe, Visa, although all of those pulled out this week, as of 2 days ago, yesterday, and then a couple of others as well. And so the remaining list includes Anchorage, Anderson Horowitz, the infamous VC, various businesses you wouldn't have heard of, sort of blockchain companies, Coinbase, Facebook, obviously, although it is a separate business, Lyft, Spotify, Uber, Vodafone, Zappo, etc., Union Square Ventures. So still quite a formidable group of people that are putting their names to this thing. And they're pushing on, despite the EU starting an antitrust investigation, despite US senators writing to those companies that pulled out, explicitly telling them, so Visa and MasterCard were told in writing that if they were part of this, then the other purview of their business, the rest of their organisations would be subject to additional scrutiny. I mean, obviously they were like, whoa, okay, we've got quite a lot to lose here. And so there's a real tension going on about whether this thing will ever exist. And I think a lot of people would have stopped there, but Facebook are not stopping. Like they have said, they sort of smile politely and say, well, we will keep working with regulators until they are happy. But what they don't say is, and if they're not happy, we won't do this. They are just like belligerent that they will continue. So anyway, that's a bit of a waffle, but hopefully that catches everybody up on a year of Libra to get us to where we are today. Have you had a question?
I just wondered, I saw the headlines of people pulling out, like Visa and there seems to be others.
Yeah.
Why did they? I didn't really understand.
Why did they pull out?
Yeah.
I mean, the press releases, you could believe, I suppose, and it's, we're focusing on other initiatives, it's too uncertain at the moment, regulatory scrutiny, but I mean, what do you guys think? Why did they pull out?
I also wonder whether there's a bit of, if we get involved in this thing, then we can understand like the nuts and bolts of how like this entire industry would propose to put this type of product together, which is important knowledge to have, whether or not you join it, ever intending to actually bring it to life or not. It can perhaps be seen in some respects as a knowledge gathering exercise. And yes, there was regulatory pressure, but there's a lot of, when you work in this space, there's a lot of slow down, because you end up being like, if you feel like you're out on your own doing something, right? So that's why kind of conferences in this space and educational sessions and things are really popular, because people want to know that they're in the right zone, that they're the way they're thinking about it is the same way that other people are thinking about it. You're constantly trying to look for that. You want to be on the edge, but you want to be within the comfort zone of knowing what other people are doing, but kind of at the leading edge of that, right? That's like the sweet spot to be. So you probably, if you're Visa and you've been thinking about sort of improved type payment systems and what you might be able to do in the world, and Facebook comes along and says, we're thinking about doing this, do you want to join in and have these initial discussions? You're going to be like, yeah, I'm definitely going to that. I definitely want to know what they're doing. But then if the regulatory pressure heats up and it looks like the project's actually going to take longer and maybe it's not, there's various issues, you might think, right, we'll pull out of that, we'll figure out in the background now all the ways to fix all of those problems that they've already uncovered for us. And then maybe we'll try to lead a similar sort of product, but in a slightly different, in a slightly different way.
Have they had to put in a lot of investment to be part of it, or did they're just in it for the education and progress?
So the association is kind of, I don't think that there was too much initial investment from amongst the companies that initially joined. There's a lot of in this industry, there's a lot of thought community that happens, and a lot of the way that things are developed is they're open source, and it's like they're crowdsourced ideas, and crowdsourced projects is the way forward, and it's all very communal. I mean, mostly. And so that's really the way that they proceeded with this project as well. I don't think it's not like huge financial losses to have been involved for the first part and then to leave or something like that.
I think it was 15 million ahead, wasn't it, to sign up, and I think it was bonded, so they might get it back, I don't know. But anyway, the FT said, which I thought was quite poignant, based on your question, so members of the so-called Libra Association became wary of the project after regulators and politicians across the globe warned that the mass market digital currency could pose a threat to the existing financial system, as well as lead to money laundering and increased financing of terrorism, right? So some former members, off the record, told the FT that Facebook underestimated the scrutiny the project would draw and then oversold their commitment to being part of it in the first place. Which speaks to what you're saying about actually maybe there wasn't that much commitment other than saying, well, yeah, in principle we'd be interested. Here we go. So actually all they did was sign a non-binding agreement to contribute at least 10 million. So they didn't actually make those contributions, they just said they would. Interesting. And blah 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 blah, privacy, antitrust. But anyway, the final straw, several said, came after Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook's chief exec, was called to testify before Congress later this month. So there's a kind of impending Senate hearing with Zuckerberg, and I think some are saying, okay, this is we don't need any more bad press about this. And a lot of them had been media blackout on it as well. None of them ever gave statements on it. It was really interesting. You never got an on-the-record comment from Visa, MasterCard, any of them. Despite every press conference it coming up, they would say, well, no comment. Because they clearly were trying to distance, they didn't want to be in the story, right, that was going on. So, anyway.
I think it'd be good to talk a bit about why the big backlash. Some of the kind of structural reasons, why is this such a major problem? Okay, so we've touched on trust issues with Facebook. Yeah. And you've got issues around their data management, around privacy, and around the potential a centralized corporate, Swiss association, but kind of corporate centralized body having all of this data and control over potentially billions of transactions all over the world. That's one aspect of it, but what's the big challenge to national governments? So the French and German governments came out and said that they were basically completely against Libra because it was a threat to their monetary sovereignty, which I thought was fantastic. Wow, somebody in the crypto space has made a national government stand up and say this is a threat to my monetary sovereignty. And the issue is with the structure. So the idea of having this basket of assets means that if suddenly billions of people want to just transact in Libra, and the assets behind that are a basket of multiple different assets, then those transactions, the value, if you like, that's being transacted is no longer tied down onto money supply and issuance of like the dollars, which, you know, within the US kind of economy and the macroeconomic structure has a lever for them, right, of power. And it's part about how they control inflation, interest rates and things. You use money supply as one of those macroeconomic inputs that helps to sustain the economy. If you take that away by generating something that's based on a basket of multiple assets, then you take away this lever of the government institutions to be able to control the economy in the way that we've basically done so for now, like, I don't know, 150 years or whatever, however long it is. And that's why they're really quite, I believe that's why they're really quite frightened about it.
I'd just be interested, who would you trust with this power?
Boris Johnson.
If it's not Facebook.
Well, that's
China said, you know.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question, and the China point has come up, you know, majorly, and I think even yesterday, like Cointelegraph ran an article about how basically if Facebook's Libra, or was it Mark Carney? It might be Mark Carney made a comment back in August, I think, as well, that if Facebook's Libra doesn't go ahead, then basically the Chinese are going to create their CBDC, their central bank digital currency, and that is going to become the money of the internet, or, you know, this kind of digital currency around the world. And so why would one think that that's necessarily any better than, you know, a corporation like Facebook that's come out and said to everyone, you know, look, we'll work with the regulators, we're trying to be really open and do this properly. And I think that that's a really good point. So some of the resistance, I think, to Facebook is resistance to change, right? And the idea of moving from the real world into this digital representation of value is one huge bridge for most of the sort of general population to leap over. So there's resistance to change, but you've almost got to strip that away. You've got to expect that change is just happening. And then, so once you minus that out of your initial reaction, you've then got to work out, well, what should the change, you know, what would be better for the change to look like? And potentially, you know, a corporation like Libra, an association of companies, big companies coming together, maybe that is a good way forward. Maybe the issue with that is that, you know, you've got all that centralized data in an organisation that's not like a public body. It doesn't have elected representatives. It doesn't have. There's no democratic sort of, as in general people, democratic influence and you're kind of setting up a private organisation to stand off against our public political institutions. And is that really how we think the world should go forward? I'm not really sure. That sounds like a massive conflict to me.
Is it not offset? I mean, maybe not completely, but offset somewhat by the fact that it's encrypted, so they don't actually necessarily get to see your details.
Well, this is the other kind of leg of it, and I see the question at the back, and I'll come to you. So it's a threat to governments in two ways. First is like monetarily. The second is identity. So it's like one of the two key roles of the government is to like hold your identity, your passport, your driving license, to say who you are. And actually, Facebook now arguably has a better handle on identity than governments. So if you take that away, you take monetary policy away, then like, so what space is there left for governments apart from like lawmaking? And even Amazon is making its own like writing laws now around facial recognition. So it's like it's a properly existential threat for what we think of as government at the moment. One kind of interesting parallel or overlap with Libra is, as a basket of currencies, USD, Euro, and Japanese yen, I think, it's the same as the UN's SDR, Strategic Drawing Reserve, with the exception of renminbi, the Chinese currency. And so if you've got this essentially opaque organisation that has the same power as the UN to create or change financial policy, that's pretty serious. I actually think it's Facebook's long-term interest to, so at the moment it's like a public permissioned network, so you can see the transactions but only the family members as nodes can write to it, and they've done that to solve specific engineering challenges. They looked at using, allegedly they looked at using Bitcoin for this. It couldn't handle the transaction volume, and so they've created their own network to do this. I think actually it's far more advantageous for them for that whole blockchain to become publicly permissionless, because so Facebook have like these 3 existential threats at the moment. I've got content moderation in that if governments actually hold them to account for policing the content on their networks, they become financially like unviable or like people go to jail. They've got the fact that they're monopolistic, so they own the marketplace and they operate within it, and they're like, they hold the data, they make use of the data, they've got the platforms, they're like one big fat target. You could I'm surprised they've failed to hit Facebook with some sort of projectile so far. And the other one is like just the public perception that Facebook owns and controls your data. And so why I say I think it's a really interesting bit of elegant corporate strategy is that Libra is not just a financial infrastructure and a payments network, it's also, there's like a brief mention in the white paper that says, and also identity can be stored on the Libra blockchain. So I can quite easily imagine a world where Facebook say, right, as of tomorrow, all of your personal data, your identity, your private data is going to be stored on the Libra blockchain. And what we do is we help you look after your identity. We're custodians. We are here to help you protect your identity, to monetize your personal data. And this other very secure, very performant network over here is where all that lives. And if you want to take your identity away with you, you can. We'll give you the private keys. You can go and use Booking.com or Lyft or some other centralized identity custodian to help you manage and protect your data. And their business will become much simpler, and it'll be about trust. Like, you can trust Facebook to look after your identity, your personal data. You laugh, but like, that's why I think it's so clever, because they're just like standing on the side, and the regulation goes right past them, and they're like, well, you're regulating us about data, we don't hold any data. And so, I think a Swiss non-profit association is probably the most bulletproof that they could make these days as an infrastructure at the moment. Much better to make it publicly permissionless, because then, like Bitcoin, there is no way to take it down, and there is no attack vector for any kind of regulation.
There's a couple of questions.
Yeah, Nakiru, after the...
I know Nakiru.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. If you think about it from a conceptual point of view, this is a very Western play, right? Even forget China. If you look at emerging economies, it's like, what's your view on like the role that the developing countries play in this, and then is it disenfranchising them, and is it building digital colonies again, and is Facebook at the spearheading them?
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. Understand that. So there's something that's touted as an alternative to Libra called Venus. Apparently we can only take names from the stars in the universe. But yeah, and that's it's a project that's intended to help to digitize national currencies. So rather than, kind of like the CBDC, the Chinese idea. So rather than having a basket of currencies, it's a method of digitizing national currency. And I understand that emerging markets kind of government interest in that product is pretty high, because obviously it maintains that national sovereignty type angle that we've been talking about, why kind of European governments in particular have been particularly upset about the idea of Libra. But what does it do? Well, in a way, a lot of emerging economies have kind of leapfrogged a bit. So you've got like a system where money doesn't, we here we think about the pound and it's stable and the dollar and it's stable, and so we actually quite sort of tied emotionally to our money, to like fiat currency, and pushing people over the edge into like the digital crypto space is quite hard to do. If I talk to like my family and friends and whatever, it's really difficult. Oh no, we never need that. Like that's a really bad idea. I think if you look at it from the perspective of emerging markets countries, there's not that. I mean, there's just not, because the currencies themselves have been so volatile and kind of useless and damaging and painful in a lot of respects that you don't have that same almost like resistance or attachment to what's there now. So there is a sense in which you can, in addition, also accessibility to money. We talk about kind of unbanked populations and people who don't have access to the traditional kind of tools of the financial system that most people in the Western world do, means that actually accessing digital money via just a phone and an electronic wallet and things, again, like there's not this sense of, oh no, but that can't be proper because it's not a bank. I mean, there's just not that resistance in a way. It's almost like the mindset can leapfrog straight into digital wallet, digital currency. If it's more stable and actually holds value, then brilliant. Almost kind of, there's a sense of like, what we were talking about before. Is it so bad that it's a corporation that's managing this central kind of stability of this? As long as it's stable and we can use it and it's accessible. So it's kind of I think there's a problem if it shifts more, if it kind of takes what existing power there is in those economies away, like even further. But there are also, so that's obviously a drawback, but there are also potential benefits, like the ability to outreach from places that are more remote in the world, and also places that are more sort of geographically and financially remote in the world, through a single type global currency directly into other markets. That's got to be a good thing and a way of creating more networks, direct networks for those places into the rest of the world. So there's that kind of outreach angle. There's also the stability argument that I've already run through, and then there's that accessibility angle where if you don't have to go through, if you're not plugged into the traditional financial system, but to use this, you don't have to go through one, then that's good. That's kind of taken down a barrier. So I think there are aspects on both sides.
I think the other emerging market thing, which is really interesting to look at, is maybe that's part of the motivation why all of these organisations are really interested, is that how are they going to get their next $1 billion of growth? How are they going to find that next 100 million users or whatever? Well, there's a lot of untapped potential actually in some of those economies where there's plenty of wealth, right? But there are lots of barriers for it reaching the Western corporation. So I think, I don't know, that's the other side of it from my perspective. Like, I'm Facebook, I'm thinking, how do I add advertising revenue? Well, there's loads of people in this country who don't buy much Facebook advertising at the moment. How can I break those walls down a bit and help kind of kickstart that economy and then be the kind of custodian for it? I don't know, I think there's something in that as well. And on the privacy thing, don't kid yourself. Like, I mean, come on, like, if any of you ever looked at like what the NSA do or privacy, really, come on, not anymore for any of us, frankly, because metadata at scale means they can work out who you are. So it's all very well Facebook saying, well, we won't keep your name. Okay, Facebook, fine. But they will know who you are, what you like, where you live, what you do, so what train you catch every day, what you like in your coffee, Just with the back.
One of the big distinctions that I don't think is quite being made as well as I'd like is the difference between Libra and Calibra. Right? Calibra is the wallet.
Sure.
Calibra is a wholly owned subsidiary of Facebook. And the government are mandating KYC and KYB, know your customer, know your business. So all of that data will be in the Libra wallets, like Calibra, which will be more than one. The Libra currency, to my understanding, will just be pseudonymous transactions, not like what is currently in Bitcoin. So all of those Foundation members will not have access to the data. Facebook's a data company. At the end of the day, Calibra is their big play, and providing 2.6 billion people with an identity that's globally recognized is a huge play, plus 300 million small businesses.
Totally agree. So important distinction, absolutely. So along with launching Libra, which is the kind of, as David talked, you know, the kind of network behind it all, which is open and free to all, and there's this association that runs it, it's sort of untouchable almost in the way they're trying to put it together. They're also launching their product. It's a business really called Calibra, which is their wallet, which you will interact with Libra with. They really should have done a better job of naming all of these things, or maybe they wanted you to get mixed up between the two. I'm wondering if that might have been related. Because frankly, Calibra will of course end up being the incumbent here, because it's their product, it's their sort of founding idea. But there will be other wallets, we're told by Facebook, and everyone will have the chance to start wallets, and it will all be open and fair, and I'm sure lots of people will choose to use alternative wallets. Well, maybe some people will, but it seems pretty clear from what Facebook have said that, or rather what they've not said, in my opinion, that Calibra will end up being favourably integrated into Facebook's other services. Actually, this was a real point of contention in the Senate hearings. They really pressed him on this, the boss of Calibra and Libra for Facebook, and he wouldn't say no. I mean, he basically said, look, of course we're going to integrate this into our other products. Other people will have the chance to do that through our developer APIs, and, you know, sort of standard corporate response. So thank you, that's a really important distinction.
Two areas, one being process of crime, AML, or sorry, money laundering, that doesn't seem to come up at all, but the criminality of this and cryptos in general must be quite huge. Just secondly, the other bit is, I think from a taxation angle, governments and treasuries can surely close this down at any point with just highly taxing it. So once this all comes out, if governments just turn around and say, well, we're going to add a VAT equivalent onto any crypto transaction at a rate of 30% per transaction, and every jurisdiction's got to stick to it, it closes it down, no?
So the two questions, David answered, the two questions were AML KYC, so anti-money laundering, and we haven't really talked about that much, how does that play? And the second half of it was around taxation, and can governments use taxation to shut down this at any point should they want to?
So the KYC AML stuff is really interesting. It theoretically, like, its purpose is to stop money laundering, and yet who do you see getting fined for money laundering? All the banks, all the time, and that's when they get caught. And there's an interesting question for us as the global economy, like, is the risk of adding 3 billion un-KYC, un-AML users to the global economic network, is that risk worth more than the benefit of connecting everyone on the globe to a global economy? Assuming that there are people out there for whom there is no other identity provided than Facebook.
You mean because all those people wouldn't pass the current level of privacy?
So would we rather include them and suddenly have access to, like, you know, basically doubling the people that are within our financial system, being able to transact them, you know, gig economy. But a lot of the stuff with Bitcoin, a lot of the really good use cases are people from the developing world sending money back home. So you're from the Philippines, you're from India, you're working hard, you're sending money home. A lot of that goes through Bitcoin, and especially where countries have, like, really tight currency controls, like bypassing that. So there's some stories that came out, a bunch of deleted tweets, basically saying how, despite the fact China's got a ban on buying Bitcoin, there's actually a whole bunch of over-the-counter trading that does go on, and it is knowingly allowed through like WeChat, and essentially if you get your account blocked, then they can get it unblocked super quickly. And it's like, it's very, very murky what's happening with all that stuff, but I think all of that's really interesting. What does global identity, what does global economy look like? And it's forcing us as people to talk about some of these issues where previously we haven't been thinking in that way. I think enough, because digital is like disrupting everything left, right and centre, and it's inevitable that money, government, identity, personal data, privacy, economic, like that, those are just the next dominoes to fall down when we all connect to like this global brain. The second question, tax. Another interesting dilemma, right? So if having this currency increases the amount of trade and the amount of commercial revenue that can already be taxed by the government, then is it in their interest to shut it down? Like, you know, this is the dawn of the money wars, right? You've got fiat currency, that's what people have at the moment, whether it's the pound sterling or the Venezuelan bolivar or the Zimbabwe $3 trillion note, like, they're there. You've got Bitcoin over here, remember, which is always a hedge against all this stuff because it's already, you know, anonymous, maybe, public, permissionless, governments can't control it. That exists and it's not going away. It's the most secure computing platform ever invented. Like, it's a thing. And all we're seeing now is corporates going, well, actually, if we take these bits of cryptocurrency here and we push out these risks of identity and data ownership there, then we can pivot our business really nicely, dodge a bunch of this regulation. Actually, it's going to take them fucking years to catch up with us. So, like, why don't we do this? And that's what's really interesting about Libra, is looking at. So Facebook took a long hard look at Bitcoin and other crypto projects, and they went, right, not enough of this, too much of that, not enough here. Like, we're going to take those lessons, we're going to apply them to our corporate strategy, and this is what the project looks like. And a lot of the white paper is basically saying why they've done these different things. It's pretty interesting stuff.
I just wanted to say something about identity and kind of AML. So there have been regulatory advances already in the space. So the Fifth Anti-Money Laundering Directive has brought crypto space into kind of contact with European, on the European perspective, with kind of AML regulation. But I don't know how many of you have ever participated in like an AML from a. So I worked in a bank for a while, right? And we had to do AML on people and, you know, tick the boxes and everything. And when you actually do that, you realise that this process, so the process, yeah, it's a pain and there are lots of boxes to check, but it is so defraudable. It really is. I mean, and fundamentally, now, and I think this was mentioned before, digital identity, or if you want to really find someone or you want to really figure out who someone is, the government ID angle aspect of that is no longer the way that a national security agency or whatever would even begin to attempt to find that person. They would use their digital footprint and their digital identity. So that is already become, you know, unless you're someone who literally is off the grid, right? And there are people who are off the grid, but that's rare. If you have a digital identity, then that is already much more traceable to you and who you are and where you're likely to be next if someone's looking for you, than your kind of paper or national issued ID anyway. And so the AML process that is gone through at the moment is very exclusive in a lot of ways. It, you know, it requires you to have like a kind of stable address, certain types of services to that address. You have to pay for certain types of things. You need to have a bank account in order to do that. You've got to meet certain basic criteria. Those things kind of bring you within this system, but those checks are very exclusive to a lot of people who ought to really be inside that system, and really not major barriers to people who want to use that system in a bad way. And there is lots and lots of, you know, money laundering. And yes, we have lots of kind of these processes and regulations to combat it, but it's not like it doesn't happen and we're worried that it's going to start happening. You see what I mean? So you've kind of got to think about the comparison of where we are now to where we could be. And there are a lot of people that argue that a real we kind of a digital identity that's built up maybe in the way that Facebook's thinking, but in a way that lots of other organisations in this space are thinking about trying to create digital IDs for people, is probably ultimately going to be more secure and harder to break down as a barrier than the existing kind of AML processes that we have now.
Whilst that's true, the ability to actually launder the money becomes much easier now. And when they're talking about certain, it was in the paper like yesterday, I believe, one of the Asian cartels that supposedly will sit on 90 billion cash a year of physical cash that they will have to be moving through businesses. This gives the ability to get rid of that aspect and hold wealth without having to physically put money somewhere. And that
how effective is KYC AML at preventing the drug trade at the moment? Like it's a fucking joke.
But this to be able to move that money or at the moment to store that money, and Pablo Escobar had the famous problem where he was buried.
It's not their own banks if they need to. And there's another really interesting piece here around shadow economies and black economies and cash. Right, you've all seen the videos and photos of tons of coke here, tons of cash there. Cash is already a permissionless currency. People send trucks of it back, and it's already in the banking system. I don't know how true it is, but government, the Mexican financial system went through some pretty bad times about 10 years ago, and legend has it was only the movement of drug money through their financial system that kept the country liquid and solvent, which is pretty nuts.
Yeah, do you know what? Let's leave that because it's a whole other session and a really interesting debate. But if we've got time, we'll come to it because we're close to the end. We said we wrap up at 10, so we've got sort of 8 minutes. Let's try and end on something positive because we've all had a pretty good rant today. As you can see, there's so much to talk about. We thought rather than just do a keynote about what Libra is, you can go read their website after this if you're interested. Let's just talk about it because there's so many different routes we could go. I think we've talked about a lot of the skepticism, a lot of the challenges, a lot of the negative side. Touch maybe briefly on the emerging market opportunity and some of that. Why don't we try and rapid fire just a couple of things that we're all excited about on the positive side? For me, I think that what Libra might create is an amazing opportunity for new, exciting business models to exist. That's kind of the promise of blockchain in general, actually, is it's like all good fabric technologies, when they turn up, they create possibilities that simply weren't achievable any other way. And we're already seeing that. There's a thing called DeFi, the decentralized finance movement. All of you today could go and convert your sterling into a stable coin that's pegged against a national currency and 12% a year interest. Right now, it's paid daily. You can withdraw whenever you want, right? Already, things are starting to happen that are breaking up the old power structures and the monopolies of banking, and it's only possible because of blockchain technology. So for me, things like that happening show me that there perhaps is a really positive future that this type of technology might empower. And while I wish it wasn't Facebook doing it, frankly, because I've had enough of Facebook and their apology tour that Zuckerberg's been on for the last 2 years. The greatest hits. I mean, we're going to get another one next month. I think somebody should be doing this, and I hope that Facebook can take a small role in this, along with lots of other organisations who, frankly, are sort of becoming nation states in their own right in our new technology era. So there we go. There's my positive outlook. What do you think?
We haven't really talked about the difference between centralised and decentralised models. I mentioned at the beginning that it would be possible to have a stablecoin system that was actually backed by other crypto. So if you had with a centralised system, and if you use fiat currency, you need somewhere to store it, right? You've got to have a custody. If you're going to do this thing where you tie your coin to a basket of assets, you've got to safely custody those assets somewhere. They've got to be somewhere, and they've got to be protected, and that creates this need for a central place, a vault, if you think of it in terms of the physical aspect of it. To me, what's really exciting is the possibility that this type of structure of money could actually come through in a decentralised way. So decentralised would mean that there is no central custodied place, like a physical place where you're holding fiat money or gold or whatever the value tie is. The value of all of that is distributed across a blockchain network, and it's effectively kind of takes away this central organisation that controls all of this, and it distributes it amongst everybody that's attached onto that network. That's a really, really big mind leap. Okay, so I think that centralised stablecoins are like the bridge. So that's what I think is really exciting about Libra. It's got loads of people talking about, well, crypto again, but in a you know, not, it's a scary Bitcoin and we don't understand, and oh look, it's worth 2 pence, it's worth 5 grand, who cares? Not in that way, but in a way that you can really relate, you know, real life value of things into the crypto world. So it's that bridge. So I think that's a really important place. This conversation is getting wider and wider amongst society. But for me, like, the big thing, like the next big thing, is doing that but in a decentralised manner.
My positive bit, and I have
Got to be positive. Got to be positive now. Come on.
If I've come across as cynical, I didn't mean to.
Do it.
There's a new world happening right now. There's mixed reality, there's 5G, there's edge compute, there's AI, there's bots, there's automation, there's like additive manufacturing, 4D printing, all this crazy stuff is barreling down the pipeline, and it's going to hit us really hard, fast. It's going to change everything. It's got the opportunity to create unimaginable wealth and creativity, like a new renaissance for humanity, where we can all, hate it or not, be Instagram influencers for a living, which is what most kids want.
Positive, David. Positive.
But it is. It's a new economy. It's like a synthetic economy of like machines and AI and people, and it gives us an opportunity to like move together as a planet towards a goal. Like, you know, it's going to force some conversations. Like, what's our end point as humanity? Are we going to like live in harmony, meditate, and raise grass-fed sheep, or are we going to like go to Mars? You know, we need to start having some of those conversations, and you know, we need to orient towards it. And having a financial infrastructure that allows everyone to participate in that, I think it's mega exciting. And it also gives us an opportunity to fix a lot of the bad stuff that we see online. So I'd argue that the reason that we're so like anti-Facebook is because there's been no regulation that stopped them. So like until recently they've been forced to like push the boat. But that's what they have to do. But think about all the rubbish stuff that happens online, like trolling, copyright theft, like spam, all this stuff. That is just, there's no economic way to disincentivize or incentivize behaviour online. So we end up with like the worst and the best of human behaviour, and no subtle way, no like intelligent economic way to change people's behaviour. It's like, you know, it's the ban hammer. It's like, that's as subtle as it gets. Putting microtransactions and tying identity and economy through how we behave online will change the way that people behave, and I think that will be for the better.
Making the web a better place. Is that a good place to end? We're right on time. Thank you so much for being a great audience. Thank you for your questions. Who knows what Libra is now? Yes. No. It is. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
To answer your question, Libra is a sanitary pad brand from Australia.